Hi, and welcome to the Brisbane Professionals Podcast. This is a podcast brought to you by SMS Law, going through the legal secrets that will benefit you and your clients, as well as having a little bit of fun as we go. This podcast is designed to educate you on, number one, complicated legal terms that we will explain in an easy to understand manner. Two, to understand why you do things from a legal perspective in your business. And three, to help you develop a plan for the future success of your business. Our mission is to help empower small to medium-sized businesses around the world to get access to legal advice so that they can help build their communities and make the world a better place. Did you know that any business owner is on average 7 months away from losing everything? That is the average time that it takes from a successful business to fold when an aspect of their business is not set up correctly. This podcast is all about empowering you and your business with knowledge and tools to ensure that that doesn't happen to you or to your clients. Let's begin, shall we?
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Brisbane Professional Podcast. My name's Craig Mason, and I have with me, as always, Jeremy Stratton. Say hello, please, Jeremy.
Hello, and thank you, Craig, for the welcome.
Thank you for highlighting that. Forgot my name there for a bit, which is interesting. Anyway, we're talking about enforcing your IP today. So if you've been following the show in chronological order, we've been talking about intellectual property, and we've come to the pointy end about enforcing your intellectual property rights. So we just wanted to touch on some things you need to consider and have in place leading up to that, where you have had an infringement and what you might do with it. So, Jeremy, what's the first thing that everyone needs to think about now and in the future when it comes to intellectual property?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I started off this series on intellectual property. The very first podcast was about what is intellectual property. And I talked about it being an intangible asset. So something that you can't just pick up and carry with you. And so really the first step is proving that you own the intellectual property. How can you prove that you own something? If you've registered your trademark, clearly you own it. If you've registered your design, clearly you own it. If you've registered a patent, clearly you own it. So that's fine. Really what we're talking about here is your copyright material, works that you've created, documents that you've created in your business. I was recently at a conference with 20 plus occupational therapists, and we're talking about this very issue. And one of the points that I made was have a document register, have a document of your precedence of the information that you've created, because it's all too easy for someone to get something that you've created and slap their logo on and say it's theirs. So you want to have a document trail. Yeah, one of the great document trails can just be to right click on the file on the computer and see when it was created. That's not 100%. Obviously, that can be manipulated, but have a document trail of when you've created what, and that will help you prove the IP that you own, so that if you do need to go down the enforcement route, that you've got that in place. So, Craig, do you want to talk about creating an intellectual property infringement strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. So you want to put together a strategy where if an IP right is infringed, the strategy as to how you might deal with that when it comes to proceedings. You also want to have as part of the strategy, though, assessment of your IP rights as well. So, legal proceedings aren't always cheap. They can be quite costly. So you want to pick your battles when it comes to this stuff. So as part of your strategy is, what are the costs and do they outweigh the actual value of succeeding in the infringement action? And it goes to making sure you've got all the, what Jeremy was touching on about the ownership. You've got it as part of your strategy, the existence or ownership of the IP rights. And keep a record of that, what you own, how it's owned, who owns it, etc. Or there's licenses that we've spoken about before. Another thing is in your strategy is about detecting infringements. So some form of system where you review what's out there as to whether or not your competitors are, using your products or whatever it might be and infringing your IP. So having some form of detection method where you are regularly checking it. As I said about the enforcement, pick your battles, set a budget, make sure you're not spending more money than what it's actually worth. And it's also part of the infringement strategy, setting goals about the nature of the infringement, what you're going to do, obtaining injunctions, that sort of stuff. So important to have a think about the strategy behind it. Don't just jump in and start instituting proceedings. And the biggest one, I think, is the regularly checking and having a detection process in place. So that's the intellectual property infringement strategy. Jeremy, what's the last thing we want to touch on about enforcing the IP for today's show?
Yeah, it's really just having that knowledge and understanding of your legal options and resolution methods. A great source is my book. I'm going to plug it there, The Business Legal Lifecycle. I talk about this in great detail, but there's lots of other resources that you can get off the internet if you want to go trudging it together. I've collated it all together. But knowing and understanding your legal options really, really is important. And if you're not sure, this is when you need to go and get advice from your lawyer. Some business coaches, they can give that kind of advice too, but you really want to get legal advice as to what your options are and what ways you can resolve any dispute that you might have with someone, because it can be costly, as Craig said before, and you do want to avoid that cost. You got to work out what's actually worth it and commercial to pursue. To really understand those legal obligations, make sure you're getting lots of advice about what the options are and what other resolution methods there might be other than running off to court, which is often, well, actually it should be the last resort when someone breaches your intellectual property. So I think that's it for today, Craig, on enforcing your IP.
Yeah, absolutely. If you need any specific advice about any of this stuff, please reach out to us or seek your advice from your advisors, as Jeremy said. That's it for us today. Please like and love and review with great enthusiasm the podcast on whatever platform it is that you're listening to it on. I was lost what I was going to say then. What do I normally say? Oh, yes, that's it. Like SMS Law on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. Connect with Jeremy or myself on LinkedIn. We'd love to see you there. And you can become part of the community that we've got going. So we'll wait to see you then next time on the podcast. Thank you, everyone.
See you then.